All right, we're happy to kick it off. Good day. I am Liron Heyman. I am head of business development at Starkware, and I am very excited today to be hosting the Influence and Realms teams, or people from the teams, to talk about on-chain gaming and how you can build complex games on Starknet. Um, uh, Feel free in the audience to request to ask questions. We'll probably do that towards the end. And without further ado, let's kick things off. Let's start with some introductions from all the speakers. Chris or Dark Horse Nightmare, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hello. Thanks for having me. My name is Chris Lexmond. I'm the founder and CEO of Unstoppable Games, and we're building Influence. If you're not aware, Influence is a space strategy game, obviously built on Starknet, and we're rapidly approaching the launch of our pre-release. Um, really excited to kind of discuss our journey and getting to this point.
Great. And Jean-Paul, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is John Paul. I'm head of community and partnerships at Influence. Excited to be talking about Influence today and just on-chain games in general and why they're great for Starknet.
Looking forward to it as well. And Loot Hero, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Hero. I'm a software developer working at Biblioteca right now on the core team and one of the leads behind the Loot Survivor game on Starknet.
Cool, awesome. I'm just still debating. I see like a lot of people in the audience familiar names, some less familiar names. So I want to strike the right balance between basic questions, but also making it interesting for everyone. Let me start with this. What for the influence team? What inspired you to create a blockchain-based game? Like, what gaps were you filling? Were you trying to fill in the existing market? What was lacking in the non-blockchain world that saw the need to come and do this?
Yeah, great question. I think this is Influence was an idea that has kind of been knocking around in my head for over a decade now. Kind of well before I was aware of blockchain or at least smart contract platforms. But it was always kind of my dream to build a game that could ultimately be owned and operated by the players. And I think especially in this case, Influence is an MMO. It's of course highly social, and I think that in large part with MMOs, the social aspect is the most important, by far the most important part of the game, and the community that arises out of these games. And so ultimately, having a game that is run by that community and that community can have confidence in being there forever was a really exciting prospect to me, and I think that's kind of the initial thought that led me to discovering that initially Ethereum was sort of like this as a smart contract platform, this great fit for that idea and that vision, and then of course that evolved as I started understanding the scaling dilemma and started talking with the Starkware team, understanding more about L2s and how we could really take Influence and make it a reality. But I think the biggest thing for me was building a game that it's sort of become referred to now as autonomous worlds, but the idea of having this game world that could persist and exist forever, even in the case of us, the developer, going away, was a really, really exciting concept to me.
Makes a lot of sense. I think when I hear about on-chain teams talk about on-chain games, there's two things: there's the immutability, which means like the ability to have confidence that the rules of the game won't change. Vitalik has a famous example where he woke up one morning to the World of Warcraft, I think, like the rules changing overnight. But also this what's it, persistence, meaning that you can always play the game decades forever,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
So I
Um,
actually, would you mind if I follow up a little
Please.
bit on the first point? Because I totally respect that that approach, and certainly there are games taking that approach, which is awesome. But I think that our approach to immutability is a little bit different. We're not saying the rules will never change, but I think another exciting aspect to me of being on chain is forkability, right? It's the alignment that it creates by being on chain, by being effectively totally open source and forkable. It forces an alignment, I think, between the community and the developer, and ultimately the community itself needs to stay aligned with itself in developing the game. So game rules, maybe they will change, maybe they'll evolve. I think that's potentially a good thing, but there's always that alignment sort of enforced by the fact that if you are ever way off, if you're way out of alignment, the game can be forked. The community can go a separate way, and that's a good thing. I think that's sort of like that tension is a good thing to maintain that the quality and the interest in the game long term.
Good point. I think the idea that the social consensus decides the rules of the game, not just like what the developers do. And if social consensus says let's fork, then we'll fork. Blue Hero, do you have anything you want to add on this question about like why on-chain games?
Yeah, I think one of the important properties for me is the high availability aspect of a blockchain, right? The fact that Ethereum has 100% uptime, since inception is a really important property. And then that combined with its durability, the fact that node operators can go online, offline, validators can enter and exit, all of these things are happening. Meanwhile, the blocks keep getting produced, and the integrity of those blocks has never been questioned. And so I think anybody who's been emotionally invested in a game really wants both of those properties, right? You always want to be able to access your game, and you want to make sure that the integrity of your game assets is unquestionable. And I think those are two key properties that interest me about building on a blockchain like Ethereum.
Makes a lot of sense. What I've seen a lot of passion from gamers to really be in this. Lou, I'm just gonna mute you. Okay, one thing I will say, transitioning to the next topic is, I for a living I basically spend my day talking to teams about on-chain games amongst other verticals. But what I don't spend enough time doing is actually talking about the actual game. Like, what's the gameplay? What are you trying to do? And I sort of forget that at the end of the day, these are just regular games that people are playing. They just happen to have this blockchain infrastructure behind the scenes. So, on that note, the influence team, do you want to just talk a bit about the gameplay mechanics, what the whole this influence game is about, the space, where the space stuff comes into it, the asteroids, the mining, all that sort of stuff. What's the game about?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think that's a good question because I think a lot of times when we talk about on-chain games, we go so deep into the dev side of it that we kind of lose track of like the whole point is we want players playing these games. So, what is Influence? Influence is a highly strategic and massively social space colonization game where players vie for dominance and control in a newly formed colony within the Adalian asteroid belt. Excuse me. So, what exactly are players going to do in this game? They're going to be mining their asteroids for resources. They're going to be pushing those resources through various industrial buildings, such as a factory or a shipyard or a refinery, to get kind of intermediate products there, to then try and construct buildings and ships to help the colonization efforts spread throughout the belt. There's 250,000 asteroids within this game, and they all orbit in real time. And so the strategic choices that players are going to have to make are quite robust. And so you're going to have to make sure that not only do you have the right materials to support a colony on maybe a further reaching asteroid, but you're also going to need to make sure that you can produce fuel or something like that to get your ship back from that area to go to market hubs. And it's going to evolve over time. And I like to tell people that this game is not played in minutes, hours or even really days. It's played in months and years. This is something that's as I stated, massively social, and we're probably going to see very large player alliances form to try and increase efficiency when you're trying to complete these very robust production chains, which will add to both the enjoyment and kind of the depth of the game. Chris, maybe you want to speak a little bit on the fact that you're kind of trying to design around emergence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think JP touched on one of the, to me, really exciting kind of core unique elements of Influence, and that's it's a multiplayer game with realistic orbital mechanics. So, you may have played something like Kerbal Space Program, where you're playing around with realistic orbits. You're having to make your way to the moon, understanding how your thrust and how much fuel you've loaded and how heavy your ship is will impact that. And we're taking that and bringing that into this massively multiplayer sphere. Now, there's obviously a lot of simplifications. You're not having to literally do rocket science, but what this results is you have this belt of 250,000 asteroids, and they're all moving independently from each other. So you have this kind of dynamic, ever-changing, emergent strategic field of play, which I think is super, super exciting. Things don't feel so static. They're changing every day a little bit, and you're having to kind of make these strategic decisions in the future about how you deal with that. So I think, like, from a baseline, emergent gameplay is guaranteed, just based on the fact that the game board is changing every day. The game board is changing, but even beyond that, I think there's, as JP mentioned, we're going to see the formation of alliances. We've actually already seen formation of alliances that have been doing a lot of really cool hypothetical work, really. Some of that informed by them playing on our test nets, but a lot of it just very hypothetical and thinking about how they will address this strategic game board. And I think that will happen more and more, and we'll see sort of a flow between dominant alliances, up and coming alliances, and see those memberships shift and move. And I'm just really, really excited to see that sort of massively social, large group dynamic play out.
How are these alliances coordinating in real time? Like, they're on a Discord server at the same time that they're playing?
Or Chris, go for it.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah. So right now, I would say that we have two large alliances, and then a few others that are rapidly, I think, growing behind the scenes, and mostly they're coordinating in their own discords, but they kind of all convene and discuss together in our Discord, the Influence Discord. And so I think, I've been actually thinking, like, how are we going to see communication between alliances work? And Discord is such a good tool. It was built for games. That, back in the days of, like, World of Warcraft, when I played, we had a guild, in game, and we didn't use Discord. We managed everything in game. And it was honestly quite a hassle. And so I think using these third-party tools are a great way to, kind of communicate better and help form community, in a larger scale that's not just in game, because you can communicate while you're not playing. So yeah, right now, to answer your question more directly, they're communicating in Discord, and they tend to have their own.
That makes sense. Actually, I like it because it parallels traditional gaming too. I think a lot of traditional gaming people are chatting Discord rather than playing the game. And I don't see why blockchain games should be different. I mean, maybe some decentralization maxis will say all the communication and social needs to be on a blockchain too, but I don't know. Loot Hero, maybe we'll move to you, and you're going to, again, the same question I had to them before. Like, ignore blockchain. You can't use any words about decentralization, permissionless blockchains. Just like, what's the game? What are you trying to do? What's the idea?
Yeah, so Loot Survivor it's modeled after an arcade machine. So you're going to put a few tokens into the machine, and then you're going to play for the high score. And if you just focus on the arcade model, then I think there's a lot of things I don't have to go in depth of because it's obvious in an arcade. For example, you're not going to stand and play an arcade machine for hours. Usually those machines are designed to last somewhere between 5 minutes and 30 minutes, depending on how skillful you are. So Loot Survivor has that property where it's going to be relatively fast. And then in terms of what the game experience is going to be like, so most fundamentally, what you're trying to do in the game is just survive as long as possible. And while you're surviving, you're gaining experience. And then when you do eventually die, experience is what is used for the high score. So whoever has the most experience gets on top of the leaderboard. So there's always a global leaderboard, just like an arcade machine. But instead of being fragmented across all the machines, there's just one leaderboard. And then in terms of the game loop, so you're going to have an adventure, and that adventure has certain stats. And each level, when you reach the next level, you can invest in one of those stats. So you could upgrade your strength or your dexterity, for example, where strength would increase your attack, dexterity would increase your chance of fleeing. And between levels, you're going to be exploring. And there's some of the things you could find would be like health or gold, which would be good. You could also encounter obstacles or traps, which would deal damage to your adventure. And you can also encounter beasts, in which you have a decision to fight or flee. And if you fight the beast and defeat them, then you gain extra XP, both for your adventure and the items that you have equipped. And you also earn some gold. And so this would be kind of the typical loop that you would level up, you would upgrade a stat, then you'd go exploring, then you reach the next level. And the other thing that you can do when you level up is you can purchase upgraded items. So there's a randomness system that produces a random set of 21 items, and there's 101 items total. And those are based off the original loot items. And so you level up, you pick a stat to upgrade, you could buy some potions, and then you could buy upgraded weapons or armor. You upgrade, you go to the next level, and every level up, the world, if it were, gets more powerful. So the beast, the obstacles, everything gets harder every level up. And so it's kind of based on statistics where at any moment in time, there's always some chance that you'll just immediately die. You'll hit the explore button. The result will be, you know, encountered pendulum blades to the head, 500 damage, you're dead, game over. But that chance grows as your level grows. And really the meta strategy is to be aware of what that chance is and then making decisions, notably which stats you upgrade, which armor you buy, etc., to try to keep that chance as low as possible. But it's sort of like blackjack or poker, where sometimes you have a good hand, but then you have a bad flop, or the card that comes off the top of the deck is unlucky. So there's definitely elements of that. But yeah, that would be the core game loop. And so you're expected to play for some games some games are as short as like a couple minutes because you just die really fast. Other games can go up to 30 minutes. And when you die, you can see what your score was and how it compares to all of the scores. And in the case where you get one of the top 3 scores, then anytime somebody puts tokens into the arcade, you get a small percentage of some of those tokens as kind of a way to incentivize competition.
Cool. Gotcha. I'm just trying to work out what to discuss next. Okay, I wanted to pivot in now to indeed talk about the infrastructure side of things. So one question is that, like, basically it's not even if the blockchain is has 100% uptime, that's very much for the blockchain to just process transactions. You always need peripheral infrastructure, whether it's block explorers, wallets, API services, indexes, all that sort of stuff. And that stuff can have a bit of a heavy load. How do both of your teams think through the infrastructure side of things and incentivizing either the community or the developers to run an infrastructure? Maybe we'll start here with Loot Hero. If that question doesn't make sense, let me know.
Yeah, so I think there's 3 parts to that for Loot Survivor. So the first is that we have 2 layers to the data that backs the client, like the game client. And so there's the index or stack, which provides persistence. And then there's also an optimistic layer that just runs purely in the user's browser. So we can actually turn off our indexer stack completely, and you can still play Loot Survivor just purely in your session. Now the limitation of that is if you refresh your game, for example, then you kind of lose that state because when you start the game, it's just kind of tracking this sequence of events in your browser. But in most cases, you don't have to refresh your game. So we've gone weeks really at certain points when we were upgrading our infrastructure where people were just playing completely on the optimistic layer. And so that's a nice fail safe because it doesn't rely on any other infrastructure. The second part would be the actual indexer tech stack. So all of our code is open source. So someone can, and it's all using modern tech like Docker containers. So anybody can just run their own full indexer stack on their system if they wanted to. And then there's kind of layers to that. So if you wanted to just run it, but then not run a Starknet node, then you could just delegate that to an RPC. On my system, I run a Starknet node as well. So I can run the entire Loot Survivor stack on my machine from the client interface to the indexer to Starknet node. Everything's just on my system. So I really have no dependencies at that point, which is really nice. And then the third option, the third layer of decentralization, I think, would be trying to get more of those stacks created, those tech stacks created from client to indexer, all of that. And so Loot Survivor, again, is an arcade machine. So you put some tokens into it. But the nice thing about the blockchain, especially here in a few months once we get the Dencun upgrade with EIP 4844, is it's going to be really, really efficient. And so the game costs around $2 to $3 in tokens to play. But the game takes that and then splits it up and gives some to players and some to builders. And on the builder side, there's a mechanism built into the game where who's ever providing the client gets a small portion of that. So say it's about 50 cents. So the player puts in $2.50 to play the game, and then 50 cents every game that's played goes to the person that's providing the client. And so right now that's the BiblioDAO because we've built that stock client. But it also serves as a reference for anybody who wants to compete and build something better. And so those rewards will start paying out in 11 weeks from now. It's like already coded into the immutable contract that just gets activated. And so right now we're kind of in this early phase where we want to inform people about this opportunity. A lot of people see our client and say, wouldn't it be great if you could do all of these other things? And the answer is yes. And some of that we've intentionally left as low-hanging fruit for people to compete. So the hope is that if lots of people are putting tokens into this arcade machine, then there's lots of incentives for people to build competing clients. And so instead of just having the stock one, which is what we have now, maybe we have 3, 4, 5 different clients all competing because anytime you start a game using somebody's client, that person gets a de facto tip of 30 to 50 cents every game. And in the case where maybe thousands of people are playing these games, that could be pretty substantial. So yeah, that's it. That's my perspective, specifically from Loot Survivor.
It's nice to hear that you can run the entire game from your own basement. Or room. To Chris and John Paul, same question to you. This is an MMO with 2 alliances with hundreds of players. There's a lot of infrastructure there beyond the blockchain. How do you see that playing out? You see a centralized entity running the servers to actually play the game, even though it's settled and secured on the blockchain, or do things play out differently?
No, it's a great question. I think we're there's certainly some differences in our approach, in our initial approach, I suppose, from Loot Survivor. Although I would say a lot of their a lot of what Loot Hero is talking about is certainly aspirational for us. But we are starting in a fairly centralized manner when it comes to the client. So our client is quite substantial. The MMO's influence is quite a complex game. There's a lot of mechanics that are quite deep, require a lot of thought that has gone into how we design the client to kind of best surface that to the user. And so initially, when we're launching our client, it will be provided by us. We have an indexer that supports that client. It, of course, generally just persists the data that is on chain, but it also is does some significant work when it comes to searchability, when it comes to surfacing specific data that you need. For example, I said that you, the player, won't need to do rocket science, but we do in the client as well as on chain. And so there's some work that has gone into the indexer to ensure that that data can be surfaced easily so that we can calculate those routes in a straightforward manner and submit them on chain. But in saying all that, we do have, I think, quite an active community development group. And there are multiple indexers, third-party indexers that have been built entirely outside of Unstoppable Games that already exist and are continuing to evolve. We have an SDK that we have made fully open source. It includes a lot of our client assets. So like all of the 2D assets in the client are there and under a quite permissive license. So we're trying to encourage the same thing for other groups, for our community developers to build clients. Interestingly, they're not looking like full clients right off the bat. And I think, thinking back to the beginning of this, that makes sense. But what we're seeing a lot is clients that will end up doing a part of the game, and they may end up doing parts of the game better than the client we offer does. An example for that I can envision and I know is being worked on is the permissioning system. So we're intending to support quite a large range of potential organizations. And to do that, we're needing to make sure that the buildings, the asteroids, the ships, all of these different
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
entities can be permissioned. And they can be permissioned in a lot of different ways, from sort of like a leasing model where you can prepay for time on, let's say, the refinery, or you can lease a lot on the surface of an asteroid to do whatever you please, build a building, land a ship, etc. Or you can actually set up your own contract and use an external contract via a hook as the controller for permissions. And so we'd expect to see, and in fact, we are already seeing many clients that are growing up around these kind of specific verticals within the game. And it's something that we're encouraging. It's something that we've actually ran a grant program for in the past and will do again. And so I think it may be that we reach that kind of aspirational goal piece by piece, but certainly we want to end up in the same place. I said at the beginning, our goal is to decentralize all pieces of influence to the point where the community could run the game without the dependence on us. It's just going to take a little bit more time.
Cool. I'm really go ahead.
One other comment I wanted to make too that may be helpful for influence and/or other builders is that Loot Survivor also built the game contract intentionally so that you could play Loot Survivor from block explorers, so from the contracts directly. So we kind of laid out those calls. So if you look at the Loot Survivor contract and you look at the write functions, there's really only like 7 of them, and they're just very verbose and explicit on what they do, and the inputs were made as simple as possible so that it provides a fail-safe as well. If somebody's in the middle of a really big game or something that's significant and all the clients go down, we have the block explorers as a fail-safe. So that would be another consideration as we all work to you leverage or realize the benefit of high availability. Like you said, there is these dependencies sometimes, and I think the block explorers are really nice and being sort of almost like CLI clients, if you will, but there is enough visualization there that they can be used. And so if you design the contracts with that in mind and frequently go to your contract and look at the right and look at what's there and try to keep that as simple as possible, I think it helps with game design, but then also provides a good fail-safe for the community as well.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
I'm really curious to see how these things play out long term, because like validating blocks, you can that stuff's solved. Like you stake and then you can propose blocks and get rewarded in your token. Like running infrastructure, there are ways like to incentivize it, but often we got to see how things play out. Like I think what Chris described, where certain community members build certain components of the game because it has benefits to them to build it, is super interesting. We'll see how things play out. What I do like though is that this whole discussion, like 2 years ago, the industry wasn't even having these discussions. I mean, maybe you guys were in your research and development labs, but 2 years ago, the industry standard was the in-game assets can be NFTs. Everything else is centralized servers, and that's the best we can do. But I think that now we see Starknet, layer threes, layer twos, the validity rollups can unlock these things. I wanted to pivot to another topic now of decentralized governance. So I know with Loot Hero, you've got some experience with the Bibliotech DAO, and also with Loot Survivor, and also Influence. Actually, don't know what your plans are with like how you see governance playing out. I wanted to talk a few minutes about this. Maybe here we'll start with the Influence team.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be probably disappointingly vague. I'll blame that in part that we're based in the U.S. But it's certainly part of our plans. We're being very deliberate about how we approach a governance token, again, for regulatory reasons, but we very much want to introduce one. And the intention, again, is for that that token to become the driving force behind management of all things influence. And specifically in this case, what that means is that they will govern the upgradability of our single entry point contract, which we call a dispatcher. But basically, the upgradability of that contract to allow for changing the game rules, updating the game rules, adding modules, adding expansions, etc. But also governing the underlying token, which is called Sway. Currently, Sway is in a non-transferable form on L1, but will, of course, with the launch of the game, be present also on Starknet and transferable at that point. And we have, I think, kind of an interesting set of tokenomics that actually drives the long-term emission of Sway in relation to the ongoing activity of the player base. That's obviously subject to an algorithm, a formula that could also be changed and updated long-term by influence governance. But I think we're really excited to see kind of how that evolves, because we have this concept of beneficiaries of Sway, of the Sway emission. Initially, the beneficiary of that emission is going to be influence the game, as well as a portion to maintain the development of the game, going to Unstoppable Games. But going back to the conversation we had about other clients, but also running infrastructure and even building other games, similar to what you see, which I think is pretty awesome, what you see in the loot space, where you're seeing all of these different games evolving around the same sort of core world. We would love to see the same thing happen with influence, where other games could evolve around the crews, the crewmates, the asteroids, the ships that exist in the influence universe in Adalia. And those could be deployed then also, for example, on Starknet, and could become a beneficiary voted on by the governance token holders in influence, and then become basically a supported part of the influence universe. So I think we've got a lot of really exciting plans there. But again, that's going to come after the launch of the game. And it's going to be a little bit down the road once we have ensured that we can push all of these decentralization efforts forward.
Cool. I actually wasn't trying to allude to that T word, but I guess my question, I couldn't have avoided it. I mean, I guess early on in the space we talked about this, like the whole like process of alliances forming is going to just happen naturally, and I guess the mechanism for them to influence, pardon the pun, things can be iterative.
Uh,
Loot Hero, you probably have some stuff. Oh, John Paul, were you saying something?
yeah. I just wanted to add really quickly. I actually wrote an article a little bit ago, but it's kind of just like the spectrum of decentralization, from centralized to fully decentralized. And I think that there are no right answers. It depends on what you're doing, and you can also move up from centralized to fully decentralized. And so, like influences, like parts of it are still centralized, and other parts will be decentralized sooner. And then as you move up, the hope is that we get to that fully decentralized, and that's been the goal since the start. I'm curious with Loot, like what exactly their experience has been with kind of going straight into fully decentralized in a lot of respects. But I think we're all still early here, and a lot of the scaffolding is around this ecosystem is finally like coming down, and we're seeing the shape of like what the structure really is. And we're going to be able to kind of like press forward in governance a lot better here in the short term. But it's been a lot. I mean, like it's hard to think about governance while you're also still trying to think about like how does the game mechanics work in Cairo.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I don't know if Loot wants to say something on governance, but yeah, there's a lot more important and pressing stuff to work on before these mechanisms are worked out.
Yeah, from Bibliotheca DAO's perspective, we have the realms NFTs, which are the governance tokens, and those govern the treasury. And then in the realms autonomous world, those will have governance powers, and it's likely that there'll be governance decisions to make inside the realms autonomous world. As it relates to Loot Survivor, it's an immutable contract that intentionally doesn't have any governance, and that that's strategic because it wouldn't really the key part about that model is the integrity of the leaderboard. And what you don't want is for somebody who scored 1,000 points today to not be able to directly compare that to somebody who scored 1,000 points in 5 years. You need those always to be one to one. So the Loot Survivor contract doesn't have any governance, it's immutable. There's parts of it where we thought we needed governance, but we were able to kind of engineer through that and not have to bring that in. So one example would be like the price of the game. So we always want the price of the game to be about $1 to $3 ish, cheap like an arcade game. And because it currently accepts Lords tokens to play, the thinking was, well, what if the price of that token goes up significantly and now the game costs $20 to play or something like that? That wouldn't really be ideal. The game isn't designed to cost $20. What we ended up doing for that though is using like a variable rate gradual Dutch auction sort of situation where there's a permissionless call in the contract called initiate price change, and anybody can call this. And what it'll do is it'll snapshot the number of games that were played at that moment, and then wait a week, and then anybody can call it again, and it'll look at how many people are playing the game over that week relative to the global average, weekly average. And then if it looks like players' usage is dropping off, then it'll adjust the price a little bit up or down. If there's tons of people playing, then maybe we need to raise the price because maybe the price is now too cheap. It's like 8 cents to play or something like that. And so it has that mechanism in it. And with Realms Autonomous World, with Influence, with some of these stacks that are meant to evolve over time, I don't see a way not to have governance, to be honest. But it is nice for a game like Loot Survivor to be fully immutable. The rules are on chain. No one can change it. If you score 10,000 today and someone scores 12,000 in 10 years, you can say that they were playing the exact same game as you. They had no advantage in that regard.
So I guess then if you wanted to kind of explore new upgraded mechanics, et cetera, you would sort of have like Loot Survivor Part 2 and Part 3, and those would similarly be immutable but have their own leaderboard.
That's exactly it. Yeah, so we'll kind of follow that Uniswap path where if there's a bug or if there's new features that the community wants, we can just deploy that. And then it's just up to the community to decide which one they want to play. And there's no NFTs or value stored in these contracts. It's just an arcade machine, right? Air quotes. So it's nice that if the community decides to move to the new one, that other one, it stays intact. It's still there. Anybody can play it. That leaderboard's there. But maybe all the tokens now are going into the new one. And therefore, there's an incentive for people to want to, provide clients for that one, to have the top scores on that one. Because again, there's these incentives for the players and the builders. So whichever machine is the most active is probably where the builders and the players are going to be circling around. But that's exactly right. That would be the plan, is just to release additional upgrades as separate immutable contracts and then let those compete to see which one ends up being the best. My personal prediction there is just the OG one is always going to have a certain amount of like meme power to it, where there's always going to be competition for that game leaderboard. Just being an early arcade player, yeah, I mean, there's a reason people are still playing Donkey Kong 40 years later. It's just some of those classics just have that superpower to them.
Oh, very cool.
I thought maybe what we'll do is we'll interrupt now for questions from the audience about the games, about anything we talked about until this point. If you want to just request a mic, feel free. Instead of doing this at the end of the session. Okay, I guess well, if nobody's requesting, I'll just continue on with the other questions then. Okay, the next topic I want to talk about was this: what makes you most excited about the Starknet roadmap? There's a lot coming up. I talk about this every day. Paymaster, Volition, 4844, fee markets, some other stuff was in the version 0.13. There was some stuff that will enable fees to be paid in stuff besides ETH. I want to hear, and also it's actually once I'm giving all the options, some of the options, there's also the layer 3 landscape is progressing nicely with stuff like Madara integrate, and there's some teams working on integrating Madara with the prover. What really excites you about the roadmap for Starknet in the next few months?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think for when it comes to influencers, there's two big pieces that are driving our roadmap right now that excite me the most. One is the testnet being on Sepolia, which we are planning to have the pre-release testnet, which will be open to everybody. It will be the full game, and it will be our sort of final test to drive any balancing that needs to be done prior to full launch. That will be on Sepolia. And then I think, although it's not just a Starknet feature, 4844 support in Starknet is huge. I think probably the entire Ethereum ecosystem is looking towards that. But that's kind of where we have aligned the launch of the full game, just because we feel like it reaches the point that sort of economic viability for players to be able to not spend too much on fees and still be able to play the game and really enjoy it. Including, I think we feel pretty confident and comfortable that will include traditional gamers who don't yet have any exposure to, or maybe minimal or no exposure to blockchain. We're really excited about kind of nailing the UX to get those players in. After that, I think it's got to be Volition. Having another substantial reduction in gas fees when it comes to the storage of, in our case, the game state is really, really exciting and sort of opens up all sorts of new possibilities for us as we move from our first release to our second, which is called Discovery, and includes a lot of additional mechanics around technologies and skill trees and repairing and durability. I think that Volition is pretty important for that, and I get really excited about the world of possibilities it opens up with that.
Yeah, Volition's I think going to be a game changer. Also, like to Lutero's point about play these things like you play arcade games, like $1, $3, something like that. Like reducing the reducing the gas costs by like 90 or less than like 95% because of emission is a huge plus.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, that puts us at the point then where for us, almost the entirety of our gas fees will be related to compute. Will be related to sequencer improving, and then that's then yet another great feature of Starknet and recursive proofs, and the fact that proofs, as usage goes up on Starknet more and more, get more and more efficient. So I think it's really exciting to think about, like, in a post 4844 and post volition world, it will still get better. It will continue to get better as people use the network more and more. So I'm really excited about that future.
It is super exciting. Nuhiro, do you want to just chime in before I?
Yeah, a lot of the same things. So 4844, I mean, just in general, getting gas costs down. Loot Survivor saw about 2,000 games played on mainnet in the last 2 weeks. So we did the pre-release as a final stage of hardening the contract, but it was the current contract just with the terminal block. So we had that on mainnet like 2 weeks ago, and then we launched the current immutable contract last week. So in those 2 weeks, it had about 2,000 games played, and people are paying about $2.50 per game. So that's like $5,000 that people played with no financial speculation, right? They just put tokens into this machine to play this game. But right now, the gas cost of that is like $10 to $20 per game. And so there's this huge value leakage from gas right now. And Loot Survivor is highly gas optimized, specifically on the storage. So most actions in Loot Survivor only update a single storage slot. So even when you're upgrading your adventure and you're upgrading your strength, you're buying 5 potions, you're buying a divine robe, a katana, all these items and equipping them, when you submit that transaction, that's all a single storage update. That's 251 bits being updated, and that's it. So typically the cost of an action in Loot Survivor is equal to or cheaper than a simple ERC20 transfer. But that's kind of the lower line. Like it's you can't really get any cheaper than that. But still, with Loot Survivor, we're seeing $10 to $20 on average for a game. So yeah, if we can get 4844, Volition, just more activity on Starknet to spread out the cost of the Stark generations, that's going to be huge. I mean, as soon as the cost to play Loot Survivor is more than the cost of the gas, it unlocks a lot of new opportunities. And Paymaster is going to be particularly exciting in that future, because if people are willing to pay $2 to $3 to play this game, and now it costs 25 cents in gas, now the DAO can just Paymaster that, right? Because the DAO is profitable. The person put in $3. We know the upper limit of gas is going to be 25 cents. So we can just cover their gas and provide a more seamless onboarding experience. So yeah, pretty much the same thing the influence team is saying. Getting gas costs down and getting settlement times up, right? Faster transactions is always going to be helpful, especially for a game like Loot Survivor, where we want a game to be played in 5 to 20 minutes. And so every time you click, even now, I mean, especially with the arcade accounts that we use, which implement account abstraction, so there's no wallet signing, which means you don't have like the wallet simulation delay. But even without that, you still click, and it's say about 5 to 8 seconds. And that's not going through our indexer. That's purely optimistically in your client running it. So it's kind of almost as fast as the network is. So getting that down to say 1 to 3 seconds would pretty much cut the time of Loot Survivor, the total game time, in half, which would be huge. So getting gas costs under $1 per game for an arcade machine like Loot Survivor, and getting the speed at which someone can play. The mobile experience is pretty good on Loot Survivor too. So this all would work really well, where you just pull out your phone, press go. The paymaster's taken care of by the DAOs, and then you can just click, play a game in 10 minutes while you're on your way to work or something like that. That's really the model we're pursuing. So yeah, 4844, paymaster, volition, and just overall increase in throughput and settlement speed.
It's such an exciting roadmap. Like Paymaster as well, you can be completely non-crypto native, pay with like your credit card and stable coins behind the scenes. The protocol's taking care of like the actual token, whether it's your loot token or the Stark token paying things. Minio. Um, very, very exciting. This is the first like Twitter space I've hosted where like after 50 minutes there are double as many people that there were at the beginning. So this usually doesn't happen. Usually after 45 minutes I'm like, okay, we need to wrap stuff up. Um, so I will continue based on that feedback. I also like that the number is it's a large enough number that's an impressive attendance, but not too large that you're like, okay, there are a million bots here. I wanted to turn this as like, what's a call to action to the listeners? What can they do? Do they wait for the release of the game? Once the game releases, where do they learn more about what all of you are up to, how to play the game, how to contribute, how to be part of the community? Where can you send people? Let's start with the influence team here.
Yeah, great question. I mean, honestly, Discord is probably the most helpful resource that we have. So if people are listening, they're like, "Oh, Influence sound like an interesting game." Like, join the Discord, and all the links to everything that you're going to want to learn are easily found there. I understand that people's capacity to kind of dive into 100 different Discords is quite challenging. So, I think the Twitter account that we have, follow that, and we do, a little less updates, and there's less to, have to follow along. And then our Substack, our blog, which really we only push things when it's, major announcements. So that's like the lowest buy-in that you have, where you're going to get the most value when you do see a message from us. But overall, I mean, like, if you're a gamer and you want to play a game and a space strategy MMO is up your alley, like that's really where you're going to want to go, is the Discord. That's where the community is. That's where the fun is had. And then, we're setting our sights on pre-release, which is coming pretty soon. So, if you guys want to get your hands on the game sooner than a lot of others, make sure you're aware of when that's going to be happening, and join the Discord. So yeah, thanks, Ron.
And the Discord, that they can go to your Influence TH Twitter handle.
Yeah, we're the Influence account is actually in this Twitter, so you can just click on that. It's got the gold check mark, so it's easy to find.
I should add too, like we are on Starknet mainnet right now. We've called it limited release. It's not the full game, but you should absolutely feel free to log in. In fact, if you want to do a Galaxy Quest, that's all you need to do is log in, and you, I think, retweet a tweet, and you can get a Galaxy NFT. But limited release is out. It's on Starknet mainnet. If you want to recruit a crewmate, build your crew, start to understand the layout of the belt, simulate some flights between asteroids, it's all there. You can start playing with the client, get a good feel for the game prior to getting started with pre-release coming up soon, which will be, again, a full game on testnet. Everybody's welcome.
And it's on testnet, so it doesn't cost you real ETH to play.
Yeah, free.
Yes. Loot Hero, where do you recommend people go to learn more?
Yeah, so same as Influence. So the Discord is right, the sort of the town square for all things Bibliotheca DAO, Realms, Loot Survivor. And then for Loot Survivor, so as I mentioned, the game is available on mainnet today. So it's survivor.realms.world. And then if you go there, you'll also see a play for free button at the top. So you can just click the play for free, and it'll take you to testnet. So it's the exact same contract with just a few of the bot protection mechanisms removed, because those add a little bit more friction, and we don't really care about bots so much on testnet. So if you click the play for free, you can go to testnet, virtually identical contract, and then you can just jump right in. And because it's an arcade machine, it's going to be fast. You don't even have to read the guide if you don't want to. Just hit start game and just start playing. And you'll probably die relatively early in the game, but that'll be fine. You play for 5-7 minutes. You get you come across like a level 10 warlock or something, and you try to attack it and it kills you. Play a few more times, like you'll just figure it out. There is a guide button and you can read. So going to survivor.realms.world, and then I highly recommend playing for free first. Like I said, the gas cost on mainnet would be about $10 to $20, depending on gas prices. I played a game for like $7 last weekend when gas was cheap. So it just depends on L1. But definitely learn how to play the game before playing on mainnet. And then the other two things to be aware of would be that there's an on-chain beast collection that was released with Loot Survivor, and the only way to get these on-chain beasts is by playing Loot Survivor. So as I mentioned, when you're playing Loot Survivor, you come across these beasts. And when the beasts reach level 19, they get a special name prefix, just like the loot items do, and they become eligible to be collected. And each unique beast is a one of one. There's a total of 95,000 of these, so they're fairly abundant, but they're hard to defeat in the game. It's hard to get that far in Loot Survivor, and then these beasts are going to be pretty powerful typically. But if you defeat one, then you mint this on-chain beast, and so the artwork's on-chain, produced by the Elite Skulls team of pixel artists, and then the Beast NFT also includes all the stats so that they're very easy to then use those to battle each other, if the community wanted to build additional experiences. So that's one other thing to be aware of. If you're hearing about Loot Survivor for the first time, start on testnet, get the gist of it. And then when you want to make the jump to mainnet, just be aware that one of the opportunities there is these collectible beasts. It's not just about getting the top score. And then lastly, the third opportunity that's available right now as part of the release of the game is our golden token NFTs. And so the golden token provides one free game of Loot Survivor every day forever. Golden token is a mutable contract. Loot Survivor is an immutable contract. So that utility is sort of enshrined in the games and can never be changed. The cost of the golden token is priced at 75 games of Loot Survivor. So if you play this game and you really like it, and you want to play on mainnet, either to try to get the top score or to collect these beasts, you're going to be putting about $2.50 in every time you play. If you do that once, twice, three times, and you think, yeah, I really like this game, maybe I'm going to play more than 75 games, then the golden token is a really good value for you. I wouldn't recommend anybody like financially speculating on these NFTs. It's very clear what this thing does. The utility is here today, not coming tomorrow. And then the mint for that is also intentionally designed not to induce FOMO. So it's just an open edition for 3 weeks. I think there's about 6 days left of that. So for the next 6 days, anybody can mint as many of these as they want on realms.world. You'll see in the collection, there's a golden token section. And yeah, it's fully opened for 6 days. So you don't need to rush into something like this. Definitely play on testnet first, see if you vibe with the game, play on testnet, decide if you like that. And if you decide that, yeah, I really like playing this game and I'm probably going to play more than 75 times in my life, and obviously these are transferable too, then the golden token might be a really good option to consider. So yeah, that's it for Loot Survivor.
Awesome. I love how both teams here have like talked about this in a very traditional sense, like talking about like costing $1, between $1 and $3 to play, or like on the weekend or $7, and if you want a lifetime subscription it's $75. Like it's very much like the traditional world. Your Spotify monthly subscription costs $15, whatever it is. Like I also like to discourage financial speculation, but I also like people to think about this like you'd be thinking about these games outside of the blockchain world. So it is very exciting. And yeah, once religion comes in, you're like paying 10, 20 cents to play these games. It can really open up a lot of opportunities. Also, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to comment on that. It's like gaming is one of like the cheapest forms of entertainment that you have. I mean, like going out to eat in the city that I live in, you're like with my partner, it's like, oh, we just spent $100 and it's one meal. And being able to play a game endlessly for, let's say, $10 a month is just like mind-bogglingly low investment in terms of dollars per like hours of enjoyment.
Yes, agreed. Okay, cool. This is all very exciting. I actually learned a lot, and now I also understand. I remember when I came into the office on Sunday, I saw the that Loot Survivor was like one of the biggest gas guzzlers on Starknet. And now I understand why. I like seeing when that dashboard has a higher, like more of a balance between DeFi and gaming. Um, I'm looking
Yeah,
forward
and
to seeing that trend. Go ahead.
on the gas consumption too, Loot Survivor is particularly well suited for Starknet because, like I said, it only uses one storage slot in general. So it's maximally cheap on the storage side of things. So post 4844, when that largely goes away and it just leaves compute, the game has intentionally offloaded a ton of things into the compute section. So even things like battling a beast, when you play the game and you hit explore and you come across a Balrog, and then you want to attack, so you hit the attack button, and then you deal it 25 damage, and then it deals 10 damage to your adventurer, and then you attack it again, and you go back and forth. Well, you would think that that beast is actually being persisted on chain because how else would that work? But in reality, it's being generated dynamically in memory based on the entropy of your adventure at that moment in time. So, and there's a lot of examples like that, where even like the market, where when you get your upgrade and you get this random assortment of items that you can buy, well, like the contract knows which items are available and enforces that, so you can only buy the ones that are available. But even the contract doesn't actually know which items are available until you call the contract to buy an item. So it's generating, I mean, really top to bottom. I mean, from the initial design, we did that with everything. Everything. In order to fit the entire game experience into 252 bits, what you have to do is outsource everything to compute. And we know because of Starknet, that's a really good long-term bet because compute will continue to go down due to the power of Starks. And so, yeah, when you look at the gas consumption of Loot Survivor, particularly on the block explorers, it's interesting because you see the amount of transactions and the relative total gas cost is actually still pretty low. But when you look at the steps burned, which is like the compute side of things, that's where it's like off the charts because there's so much happening in the compute side of the Cairo VM because we're doing pretty much as much as we can in compute versus in storage because we know that that's the better way to do it on Starknet. So yeah, I just wanted to share that insight there.
That's actually really insightful. Fully worth like I think there are a lot of people who just listened to that and didn't fully appreciate that. Like when you're only updating one storage cell per game, the data availability costs are extremely low, but the computation costs might still be high. Usually, whatever. Yeah, I don't need to repeat what you said. Um, cool. On this note, let's end. I'm happy to pause here and ask if anybody in the audience has any questions for any of us. Just request the mic, and I will, as long as you're not some shady bot, I'll let you speak. And if nobody asks any questions, then we can end here. So, as mentioned, you can go to all the Twitter profiles of all these teams and find the links to the Discord, or maybe you can find a Discord directly without Twitter. You can subscribe to the Influence Substack. And yeah, we are very excited about Onchain Gaming on Starknet. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me.